Welcome to Pyramid Times. Myself, Veena Suruvu, VP at Pyramid Times, and we have with us a very special guest, Jonathan Quintin. Jonathan Quintin is currently living in his home country of New Zealand. Before the pandemic, his livelihood came from speaking tours in the United States, Europe, and Australia. He would present to a wide range of audiences on the subject of sacred geometry and universal order. His specialty is the golden ratio. The golden ratio is a golden thread that weaves its way through the tapestry of creation, uniting diverse and contrasting elements into a harmonious whole. With the world going through the extreme changes that we are all experiencing, sacred geometry can connect us to a higher order and help us navigate our way through the changing seas. That was the old world, and he now presents his work to the world through Zoom and other platforms. You can visit his website at attunetocosmos.com, and he also has an online course available at Renais, resonancescience.org slash universal hyphen order. Resonancescience.org slash universal hyphen order. With this, I welcome Jonathan for our show at Pyramid Times. Welcome,
Hello.
Jonathan.
Hi. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I would express my gratitude for visiting us, and I have been astonished really by seeing the work you have done. I have been reading many spiritual works, but the kind of opening that your work gave on sacred geometry, it's truly transformational. It is short, but it's connects deeply to our own inner self or to the greater existence that we are. Yes. And what made you to choose sacred geometry initially?
I I didn't choose sacred geometry. It chose me. It just took over my life from when I was a little boy. Even I remember being fascinated by the patterns in nature, the flowers, the seashells, pine cones, spirals, all this beauty, but also this order, this beautiful order that was repeated over and over again, but never two shapes or forms the same. Like the snowflakes, no two snowflakes are the same, yet there's an endless number of them. And so this fascinated me for as long as I can remember, understanding the practicality of creation. And we live in a holographic universe where the whole is represented in the part. The part reflects the whole, is what practicality is. And and so as I got older, I traveled a lot all around the world through dozens of countries. And I loved going to ancient ruins, ancient civilizations. And I read as much as I could about them, especially about their mystery schools and schools of initiation, but also was fascinated with the architecture and the precision and beauty and durability of them, and how they, when I learned that they were more than just buildings, they were also observatories, and different ones around the world were facing different star constellations and had a special connection to a star constellation. And the picture just kept on developing. And then in 1986, when I was living in the Middle East, I was living in Israel and Jerusalem, someone asked me the question, what was I most passionate about? And I said, well, it's easy, sacred geometry, of course. And this is, I should mention, I was working for the United Nations there. I'd been working for them for 5 years in the Middle East. And that was my career. And I joined them so I could get into the Middle East and visit all the ancient sites and the pyramids and temples and all of that. So anyway, the question, what's stopping me from pursuing my passion, sacred geometry, full time? And I thought about it. And I realized nothing was stopping me. And the next day I resigned from the United Nations. This was in 1986. And since that time, I've dedicated just about every day of my life to sacred geometry, to exploring sacred geometry, understanding it, experiencing it, and most importantly, sharing it. Because that's the whole purpose of doing this for me, is that it's way too beautiful and way too profound to keep to myself. I just want everyone to know about it, because sacred geometry, it's the language of creation. It's universal, and it's in us, and it's all around us, and we are connected by sacred geometry. You and I are connected to an oak tree and to a seashell through proportional similarity. And what that means is that is for geometry. We have the same geometric relationships in us, the ratios and proportions that are found in music, that are found in star constellations and galaxies and atoms and molecules and everything. In fact, everything in nature contains these geometries, and that's what unites us all. And more than that, it's a tangible way for us to experience this profound order that exists invisible upon the archetypal planes as mathematical geometric principles, unmanifest, existing a priori. And it's there, but it needs something in order to experience it. It needs the consciousness that can reflect upon itself. In other words, human consciousness, because otherwise it's just existing there in a state of potential as these mathematic and geometric principles. So they need to be activated. First of all, they need a geometer as a way to bring it from the invisible to the visible. And the geometer calculates the math of it, follows harmonious pathways and resonant angles, and looks for symmetry and uniformity and relationship and proportionality and all of that. And soon it just becomes a matter of joining the dots, because the dots were already there. They just needed someone with a pencil or a pen or a computer to make them visible, because these geometries, these principles are everywhere, they're omnipresent, because in a state of undifferentiated potential. And we can know it through geometry, this order, this higher order. And it's good to know it, to know that there is something there, out there, that is really intelligently ordered, masterfully ordered. And it's an aspect of nature. So where does this geometry come from? And the answer really is self-evident. It doesn't come from anywhere because it's always been there. But as for its source, it's the same source as what created the universe and created us and the molecules and atoms and galaxies and universes. That's where it came from. And we can experience an aspect of that creative intelligence through geometry, because this is the handiwork of the creator. The creator is the master geometer. And so I've spent many years now just exploring the geometric archetypal planes. And my favorite one, of course, is the golden ratio. But there's other principles as well, like the square root of 2, the ratio of 1 to 1.414, and the square root of 3, the ratio to 1 to 1.1732. But then there's the golden ratio, which is 1 to 1.618. And you'll see when I switch over to my shared screen, just what I'm talking about. But anyway, that was a very long answer to your question. And did you have more questions?
Yes. How can one understand this geometry and get benefit out of it?
To understand it, you develop a relationship with it. And I'm going to start my visual presentation by looking at the principle of visualization. In fact, I'll go there now, and then I can talk along as we look at it.
Yes.
So visualization, the language of light.
Yes.
We don't see with our eyes. We see with our mind. And think of a dream state. When you're dreaming, the imagery in your dream state is the same virtually as the imagery in your waking state. There's no difference. Yet when you're dreaming, your eyes are closed. So you're not seeing these images with your eyes. You're seeing these images that the eyes are really just a conduit to convey information from what is in our field of vision. For example, if there's a bluebird in our field of vision, we don't actually see that physical creature itself because it's 99.9% space for one thing. But what we see is a reflection from the light source, in this case the sun. The sun shines upon it and then it reaches the density of the bluebird and it bounces off, carrying with it the information about form, color, and motion from which it was deflected. It passes through the pupil and the lens, which projects it to the back of the eye in an inverted form to a membrane layer called the retina, which has millions of light-sensitive nerve endings that respond to this reflected radiant light by pulsating and generating these neuroelectrical particles, charges that pass along the optical nerve through the geniculate nucleus to the back of the brain, the occipital lobe. And this is where the binary code of these electric charges is reconstituted to make a reproduction of what the light bounced off. And so you see with your mind. And now the whole point of that was, so what if what you are looking at is sacred geometry? On the screen, all you see is pixels, but the real power of the geometry is in your mind, is as you are reproducing these geometries, as you're assimilating these harmonic, geometric shapes and patterns and forms, which are actually encoded with the laws of creation. Your mind is learning all of these mathematical processes that are required to create these patterns. And so the patterns with their accompanying energies and vibrations, resonant vibrations, are reverberating with universal order. And the more you work with these patterns, these images, with consciousness and attention and focus and intention, then the more your brain, your consciousness reverberates with these universal laws. And in doing so, many processes are activated. But before I get into that, we're going to start with the circle, because the circle is the master shape in sacred geometry. It symbolizes the cosmic womb, source of undifferentiated potential. I made a mistake in this, doing the circle every time. In order to actualize the innate properties within the circle, it must be geometrized. and is so divided from 1 to 5. 1 represents the center, point of identification. 2 is polarity and duality, and also gives us the pi relationship with the circle. 3, dividing the circle into 3 uniform divisions, produces the first and most fundamental shape, the triangle. And this is the first of the 3 primary shapes. The triangle is made up of 3 angles of 60 degrees and a combination of 180 degrees. When the circle is divided by 4 uniform divisions, it makes the square or quadrilateral. 4 90-degree angles, a total of 360 degrees. The circle divided by 5 produces the pentagon, and 7 angles of 108 degrees, a combination of 540 degrees. And these are the primary shapes. These are the hierarchical shapes of the polygons. They're normally known as polygons or regular polygons, where the edges of each shape are equal. The angles in each respective shape are the same, but they are much more than just shapes. They're mathematical programs that among them contain all of the principles found in nature. The harmonic modules that can help attune us to natural order. They are windows to the infinite, and we can know them through geometry. So let's start with the square. The square, as are all the shapes, are finite by nature, but can relate to infinite processes. They're finite in that their edges can be measured in whole numbers, but their root power, or the interangular relationship, the numbers are infinite, are unending. They're called irrational ratios. And we can only know an approximation of them, usually reduced to 3 decimal places. Now, the relationship between the square and the root power produces the proportion 1 in ratio to 1.414. The ratio, I should say, instead of proportion. And this is a principle, this is a relationship that through multiplication can proceed towards infinite expansion, and through division can proceed through towards infinite contraction. It has the ability to align to states of cosmological order, and this is achieved through the interplay of the square with its root power. We take the root power and we use it as the base for another square. And this new square has its own root power, which we use as the base of another circle, or for another square, I should say. And each square increases by the ratio of 1.414 times larger than the smaller square before it. Now that's through addition and multiplication, but it works the opposite way through division and contraction, and we get into negative numbers. So what we have here are 5 squares in the progression of root 2. We tilt them 15 degrees to align with this universal order, and then repeat the process 11 more times in the rotation of 15 degrees. And it reveals this state of order where there can be an infinite number of squares, because at the moment there's 60, but there can be an infinite number, because this is just a segment of an infinite process. Further division by 1.414 moves towards infinite contraction, further multiplication towards infinite expansion. In this matrix of infinite squares, every square is related to every other square through a series of spirals, clockwise spirals and counterclockwise spirals, as well as circular formations. So that's the process that connects every square to every other square in this infinite matrix. And then we can get a bit more adventurous and bring in the element of motion and rotation. And we get to see other aspects of it, deeper aspects of it, of these relationships and this order and this beauty. And remember, as you're looking at this, you are creating it in your mind's eye, in your occipital lobe. And so this is actually happening in the theater and inside your cranium. And another thing to bear in mind is that geometry is the only field of mathematics that simultaneously uses both the left and right hemispheres at the same time. And when both hemispheres are working, are aligned, and through consciousness and intention, we can shift into what is called whole brain awareness, a merging of the left and right hemispheres to make whole brain learning. And interestingly, where the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere connect is at the part of the brain where the pineal gland or pineal gland is located. The pineal gland is a transceiver. We transmit our vibration out to the universe and we receive the universal energies, the celestial energies, through the pineal gland. And so this is an exercise that helps us to activate our pineal gland and to waken up more to who we truly are and to our potential and our celestial identity, aligning mind, body, and spirit in harmony with natural order and cosmos. This order stands independent of chaos, space, and time, and even creation itself. How do we know that? Because creation, nature, is organized geometrically. Geometry was there before the manifestation because the manifestation was geometrically engineered. As complex as it is, its complexities can be captured in a circle and sphere and revealed as elegant shapes, patterns, and forms. The circle and sphere are windows to the infinite. Theoretically, the space contained within them can be geometrically organized into an infinite number of shapes, patterns, and forms, all perfectly connected and aligned to higher order. In addition, Each shape in every pattern is itself a fractal and able to contain an endless number of smaller shapes, patterns, and forms, and all of them perfectly connected and aligned to a higher order. This is the principle of fractality, and this is how the universe is structured. We are anthropocosmic human beings. We contain within us. Now we look at the triangle. I'll come back to that, what I was saying. The triangle doesn't have opposite sides. It doesn't have interangular relationships. And so the relationship is vector to vertex or point to line. And it's the relationship of the length of from the top of a triangle to the base. And then if we double the triangle, it creates a hexangular system of circular division. And so let's take a little root 3 mind massage here, where we're looking at root 3, the relationship of 1 to 1.732. It creates the Genesis pattern, which contains the seed of life. It contains the flower of life. And it proceeds to where the Kabbalistic tree of life is produced. As well as Metatron's cube. So I was talking about using left and right hemispheres of the brain to experience whole brain consciousness. And this opens us to higher vibration, higher dimensions, expanded states of consciousness. And it helps to align our human instrument to the harmony of universal order. And so these geometries that I'm showing tonight, I created for the purpose of giving a means, a portal, a gateway into these realms, into this order, to bring this order into your consciousness and to bring this harmonious resonance into your cranium so that you are reverberating with the harmony of universal order, with cosmos. And all you have to do is look at them and create a relationship with them, an awareness with them. And they will open up parts of you that have been dormant for a long time. Every thought and every image we have has an associative neural pathway in the brain. And every new image and new thought forges a new neural pathway in the brain. And so you are creating all of these harmonic neural pathways in your brain that are analogous to the laws of nature. And I use different ways of delivering this information visually, delivering these principles, so that the mind gets a different perspective of it. a different understanding of it, and a fuller, well-rounded experience of it. So I'm going to stop talking now so you can just completely focus on the geometries. It's about 10 more minutes and then I'll return. Okay, now we're at the golden ratio, and we find the pentagon can be divided up in different ways, producing different shapes. It produces the five-pointed star, the pentagram. It produces these isosceles triangles, golden proportioned isosceles triangles, a short base, long side, and a long base, short side, golden isosceles triangles. And when the pentagon is doubled over, it produces the decagon, 10-sided polygon, uniform polygon. The space between two pentagram stars produces a rhomboid, a wide base rhomboid. The space between four pentagons produces a narrow birth rhomboid. And these shapes are harmonic fractals. And we have a special affinity towards them because we contain these same proportions in us, because these are the golden proportion. And so there's this resonance, this affinity, this attunement that we have naturally to these shapes. And each shape and every pattern is a fractal and can contain endless number of smaller shapes, patterns and forms, all perfectly connected and aligned to a higher order. Just look at the different ways that the pentagon can be filled. This field of geometry I call geometric cosmology or cosmography, and it's multidimensional. Its scale ranges from microcosm to macrocosm, but the ratios remain constant at every level. The shapes, patterns, and forms contain a whole range of mathematical principles, such as interangular relationships, vectors, vertices, radials, meridians, parameters, ratios, proportions, root powers, truncations, to name a few, all of which are found as organizing principles in nature. The patterns that develop from the shape combinations are cosmograms. They symbolize how contrasting and diverse elements can be woven into a harmonious whole. Many universal principles are portrayed, such as assimilation, balance, coherence, equilibrium, fractalization, harmony, interconnectivity, optimization, sustainability, symbiosis, symmetry, synergy, transformation, unity, etc., etc. They provide an opportunity for us to connect to something that is quite profound, yet grounded in the science of math and geometry. Philosophically, the geometry might be considered as algorithms emanating from the source of creation, or mathematical poetry authored by the universal mind. Pythagoras described geometry as music made visible. In this context, then, the shapes represent the instruments of a celestial orchestra, and the patterns that develop are the symphonies of cosmos. We are naturally attracted to them because we contain the same mathematical properties within us. The geometries are available to everyone who encounters them. Every person will have a unique experience of them according to a number of factors, such as personal evolution, cultural identity, religion, personal beliefs, life experience, degree of interest, intelligence, and so on. In an ever-changing and chaotic world, it can be comforting to experience something that is permanent and timeless, harmonious and profound.
Yes, it is very beautiful. It's deeper than meditation, I could feel. Although with eyes open, still we get into a kind of trance, and it brings a lot of peace. And yeah, it works at a certain levels.
So don't be surprised if you have some interesting dreams tonight.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing.
Your brain has been very busy today, but in a good way, in a good way.
Yes, that's amazing. So, do you say that this sacred geometry will help us to understand the laws of universe?
Yes, exactly. I'm saying that definitely. Yes.
Yes, and these images are not have a lot of intensity to it as well. Maybe because of the colors, or they are bringing us to the present and just look within.
Yeah, also, I use color a lot for its chromotherapeutic qualities. And yeah, so I use it for its scientific applications as well, striking the balance between that, between science and art, aesthetics. So getting the two, in the same arena, and it's more effective that way. And it adds to its effect and impact on the psyche.
It's very beautiful. And we do hear about even sacred sounds. Are they related to sacred geometry in any ways?
Sacred sounds, did you say? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, what I've been showing you, or what's right behind me, actually, is most people would recognize it. The flower of life is a mandala, and there's a certain field. Mandala is like a broad brush. It covers a whole range of sacred geometry designs by their mathematical principles, but some are actual visual representations of sacred sounds, and these patterns are called yantras, and yantra means sacred image, um, mantra, sacred sound, and tantra, sacred touch. So certain images have their sounds, like the Sri Yantra, for example, is believed to be the image of the sound of creation, the Om. And so, when you use the two together, then its effectiveness is increased quite significantly. And and then there's cymatics. Cymatics is, if you have a flat surface and you sprinkle it with sand, and then you use some kind of force, like, a drum beating or an electric, charge or something, or water even, it works with water too. These patterns, these geometric patterns appear. showing the relationship between sound and image. And you know, there's endless number of sounds, there's endless numbers of images, but we're talking about specific images that are created specifically to contain certain angles and curvatures and shapes and patterns and forms. And there are certain sounds, you know, obviously with music, some sounds are much more harmonious than other sounds. And over time, these sounds have been selected and you know, organized into musical forms and that because it's pleasing to us. Just with the imagery, the geometries and the mosaics and the mandalas and the Celtic knot patterns and all the other different ways we see sacred geometry expressed. And what I like about it is that it's, well, first of all, science. Math is science. It's non-offensive because it's found in all religions. All major religions use it in their symbology and in the architecture of their churches and cathedrals and temples and mosques and synagogues. And if we look back at the ancient civilizations, they all use these ratios and proportions that I've shown in the shapes tonight, because they observed this order in nature and they wanted to replicate it. And with their architecture, they wanted to create these spaces that were resonant with the harmonies of heaven, so that those stepping inside would experience heaven on earth, or a sense of the harmonious nature of heaven on earth, um, metaphorically speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful. And do you advise any spiritual practice, rather say a practice to connect to the harmony of universal order?
Well, the most effective way is drawing the patterns yourself, getting a compass and a ruler and a protractor and other instruments, and drawing them yourself, because that way you're connecting with it on different levels. You're connecting with it kinetically and physiologically, you know, with your hands moving in the directions and the angles and the ratios of this natural order. Visually, of course, mentally, of course, and as you're doing it, even emotionally, because you're creating these geometries, these archetypes, these fractals, these oh, these keys, these templates. You're creating them out of nothing. You're giving birth to these geometries, and it's a very impactful experience. So definitely that would be a way. And then coloring them, and you're adding your energy to it more, or more you're absorbing the energies of these geometries into your own, you know, vibratory field, so that it's becoming a much more integral part of you, who you are.
That's very nice. And who are your target audience generally? Is it students,
Oh,
mathematicians?
target audience. Well, you know, I've been doing this since, I said, since 1986, and in, I think, 1990 I started showing it in schools, from preschool level to university, actually to mathematicians conventions level. And just a word aside from here, I didn't finish high school. I didn't pass a single test in math. I failed everything in math. I left high school as soon as I could. And everything that I've learned, it's been self-taught. I've worked it out. And that's, you know, with dyslexia and a few other little interesting quirks have helped me understand it more deeply that way. But Oh, so my target audience, my one of my favorite audience when I was doing it at the schools were the young ones, because the young ones would become enraptured with it. They would stand on their chairs and clapping their hands and stamping their feet, and I would ask the teachers beforehand, don't restrain the kids, just let them behave however they want to feel, and joy and ecstasy and excitement was the energies that came out of these unfettered children, these children that had not yet quite been brainwashed in the way that their older siblings and parents had been, and so it just flowed through naturally and abundantly. But my target audience is everyone. Yeah.
And does these sacred geometry patterns help in the healing of an individual or healing of the planet and improving their extrasensory abilities or these things?
Well, you see, the what's happening in the planet at the moment, and for all times, has been influenced by mass consciousness, and our contribution to mass consciousness is our own individual consciousness. What state that is in, that's our currency. That's what we are adding to this mass consciousness, which is being reflected out in the world situation. And one of the things about resonance and harmony and ratio and proportion is it's exponential. You don't need as many people in a higher state of consciousness aiming for enlightenment. But higher, it doesn't have to be the point of enlightenment, it's heading that way. It doesn't have to be half the population. It doesn't have to be anywhere near that. It works through exponential fractality, where the macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm. We have a microcosm. We contain the macrocosm in us. Rumi said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop," meaning we have the entire universe in us. We are a fractal. We are a hologram of the universe. And so it's it's a two-way street. We're sending and receiving. That's the pineal gland, the transceiver, the part of us that is reacting, responding, engaging with beyond ourselves, with unity consciousness, with the unified field. That's another thing. It opens us up to the unified field. When I say it opens us up, I'm saying it's opened me up, and it's opened up those who have, worked with this kind of thing, with consciousness and intention and purposefulness. It's opened them up more and more and more to unified field, to unity consciousness. And another goal with it, human potential, is super consciousness. We use such a small fraction, a small part of our brain, that it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. It's the way we've been trained over the centuries. The powers that be wanted workers, not people who would become self-empowered and would not see the need to service those in the privileged positions, but would rather use their time for personal growth and expansion. That has never been well received by the powers that be. But this is an extraordinary time. When I first got into sacred geometry, no one had heard about it. I'd be the first person to introduce someone to it. But now, it's everywhere. I've seen this grassroots awakening, which it was increasing, and then, the turn of a century, it just blossomed. And it didn't stop growing. It's continuing to grow and to make inroads into like every avenue. I'm seeing it everywhere now. I would see it occasionally in the early days. Now I'm seeing it everywhere, including and often being paraded around on people's tattoos and body, art and that, and jewelry and clothing and that, because people are catching on to the significance of the value and the beauty and the connectivity of sacred geometry.
Yeah. Can you as well speak on presence of sacred geometry during ancient times?
Oh, well, it was a way of life to them. They built their entire, I'm talking about, certain ones. For example, the Greeks and the Egyptians and Aztecs and Mayans, and many you find that abundant in India is just, I would say it's the most enriched country, singularly, out of any other country, find the most sacred geometry architecture in India. You're blessed with, the richness of your culture. um, it was a way of life, and cities and societies were structured upon geometric principles. Some of them even used currency, but all you have to do is look at their architecture and find that the ratios and proportions that they use to create these amazing um, constructions that we can't match today with our modern technology. We can't match the precision that they use and the weights that they lifted in Giza, the pyramid in Giza, the stones, the weight of the stones, the rocks that they lifted, the pillars, and that. We have nothing that could do that. Not our strongest what do you call them, port side cranes, the cranes that load ships and containers on and off ships, and that the strongest cranes we have would not manage to do the lifting that was required by that. So they knew something we didn't know, we don't know as yet. And that's what got me interested in it, enough to want to live in the Middle East and explore all these places, was the realization that if the builders, if the architects of these amazing civilizations place so much importance in sacred geometry, it was really worth getting to know. And that's what I've been doing with, most of my life.
That is truly amazing. And what are the courses that you offer, and how can people reach out to you?
I offer a course through a website called Resonance Science. I'll spell that RESONANCE Science, SCIENCE.org. And on there, it has courses. And if you go to courses, then I'm listed there. It's a website of a friend of mine, Nassim Haramein. He's like a modern day Galileo. He's a physicist who's working to bring free energy to the world. And he's also a very dear friend of mine, and we often gave talks together in America and in Australia. And we've known each other for a long time. So I've got a course there. I've got a website, attunetocosmos.com, and I have YouTube page, youtube.com/Jonathan Quintin, spelled JonathanQuintin. And that's how you'd find that.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And what is your vision towards this planet in the coming years?
Oh, I want to see us excel. I know our potential. I know what's just waiting. And this is the time. I've prepared my whole life, just as many light workers have been preparing their whole life for this time where we're going to make the leap from being asleep to not just being awake, but being enlivened and connecting to our potential, to our celestial identity. We all come here with a gift and a purpose, and geometry will help you to connect to that purpose. And drawing the patterns, in my course, I have quite a few drawings to do. Um, it's a very powerful way to do that, and you can build them as well. You can build them with toothpicks, with cotton buds, with cardboard, with wooden doweling, all different ways you can build, these patterns and forms, and connect to this geometry. It's a very powerful process.
That's very beautifully put how we can connect to our own celestial reality, which is beautiful or bountiful, and a lot of ease would be there in that world, definitely. And can you also give final message for our viewers?
Well, I hope you've enjoyed what given. I've shared it with much love, and it's the purpose of my life is to share it with you and others who will benefit from this knowledge and from connecting with this order, and in so doing connecting with that part of yourself, because that's what it's all about, is awakening that flame that is within every person. Sacred geometry is a good way to do that. So
Yes,
I
thank
wish
you
you all
so
the
much.
best.
Yes, yes. Thank you so
If,
much, Jonathan.
oh, Pyramid Times, I will tell my friends to subscribe. Yes,
Yes,
and I will.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is a phenomenal information that has flowed, and we really thoroughly enjoyed the stuff you have shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Bye bye.
Yes.